Good morning. We are about to encounter notes for chapter 7.5. And here, what we're going to be doing is actually solving trig equations. So, what we're doing is we're combining concepts from chapter 6, where we will need our trig circle. So, make sure you have your trig circle out. And concepts from 7.2, where we might have to simplify some of the trig expressions in order to solve. So you may need your calculator for some inverse functions, but most of these will be solved using your trig table. So let's look at the first one. What you always want to do first is isolate the trig expression. So we're going to isolate sine by adding 1/2 to both sides. And that's a little thick, so let's fix that. So let's add 1/2 to both sides. So now we're actually looking for sine of x equaling 1/2, which means that we want to find the value of x where our sine function is equal to 1/2. So again, just take a look at your trig table to solve for the angle measure that you're looking for. We want our angle measures in radians. So go to sine, look for where sine is equal to 1/2, then go to your left and find those angle measures. So sine is equal to 1/2 at pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6. So remember, for most of these, you will have two values. Also think about, we're looking for where the value of sine is positive. Sine is positive in quadrants 1 and 2. And also, once you find one of the values, the denominator of the radian measure is going to be the same. So if you have two different denominators for your radian measures of these values, then you did something wrong, and go ahead and reevaluate. All right, so that was number 1. Let's look at number 2. We're looking for where cosine x times 2 cosine x minus 1 equals 0. Both of these are factors, so we're going to separate them and set them both equal to 0 and solve for x. So cosine x equals 0, and we want to look for that angle measure. And here, let's solve for cosine x. So 2 cosine x minus 1 equals 0. Add 1. Two cosine x equals 1. Divide by 2. So we're looking for where cosine of x equals 1/2. So what are those angle measures? All right, so let's come back here to where cosine of x is equal to 0. At what angle measure is cosine equal to 0? Well, that's at pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. And then we want to find where cosine of x is equal to 1/2. So at what angle measure does that happen? Take a look at your trig table. Go to cosine, look for where it's equal to 1/2, find your two values. Good, that was pi over 3 and 5 pi over 3. Why are these two values so far apart? Okay, I want you to think about the fact again, here cosine is a positive 1/2. Cosine is positive in quadrants 1 and quadrants 4. So it makes sense that these two values are far apart. All right, let's go to number 3. Sine x cotan x equals radical 3 over 2. So we don't want to try and solve for these at the same time. But what we can do is we can simplify this expression, and it will come out to be the value that works, okay? All right, so let's change cotangent to what? Good, cosine over sine. Remember, try and change everything to some form of sine and cosine. So now we can cancel And we're actually only looking for where cosine of x is equal to radical 3 over 2, because this value will satisfy this expression. So where is cosine of x equal to radical 3 over 2? Good, at angle measures pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. All right, number 4. Okay, here we have to solve similar to what we did in number 2. So let's subtract 1 from both sides. We get 2 sine of x equals negative 1. Dividing both sides by 2, we get cosine of x equals a negative 1/2. So remember, sine is negative in quadrants 3 and 4. So those are the angle measures we want to go to, or those are the 2 quadrants we want to look at. So the angle measure where sine is equal to a negative 1/2 is 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. All right, let's go to number 5. All right, here we just need to move the 1/2 to the right. So let's add 1/2 to both sides. And now we have cosine of x is equal to 1/2. At what angle measures does that happen? Remember, cosine is positive in quadrants 1 and 4, so they're going to be pretty far apart. Good, so that's pi over 3 and 5 pi over 3. Number 6. So here we have cosine of x, tangent of x equals 1/2. We're not trying to find for both of those values that will work for the product. So let's simplify this. So cosine of x, and what will we change tangent to? Good, sine over cosine. So now we can cancel, and we're really only looking for where sine of x is equal to 1/2, because that will also satisfy this product. All right, we did this earlier, so you shouldn't have to look very far. Sine is equal to 1/2 at pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6. And you can always check this. If you recall using that store feature, you can store pi over 6 in x. Make sure you're in radians. And then type this in, and it should give you 1/2 or 0.5. All right, let's go to number 7. Don't let this sum and all of this information fool you. Take a look at both of the expressions on both sides of the plus sign. Tangent is common, so let's factor a tangent out. That leaves us, tangent x. That leaves us with sine squared x plus cosine squared x. Well, if you recall from your trig identities, that's 1. So basically, we're just looking for where tangent of x is equal to 0. So go to your tangent, go down to where you see tan equal to 0. And the 2 values that we'll include here are 0 and pi. You don't need 360, that's basically the same as 0. So if you were to store this in x and then type this into your calculator, this should work to give you an answer of 0 for this expression. Last but not least, number 8. Wow, we have 2 different trig functions here. Again, we're not trying to solve for both of them. We don't want to see when cosine of x is going to be equal to 3 sine of x. So let's simplify this a little bit by dividing both sides by sine of x. So we can cancel sine here. We have cosine of x over sine of x equals 3. I've seen that somewhere before. Where have I seen cosine over sine? Right, your trig identities. Cosine over sine equals cotangent. So now we have cotan of x equals 3. Well, because this is not something that falls on our trig circle, we're going to have to use that calculator. And if you don't want to have to worry about putting 1 over something, just change this to its reciprocal function. So the reciprocal of cotan is tangent. And let's look for where tangent of x is equal to 1/3. So now this is a function that I can easily look at. I want to use my inverse. So what I want to do is second tan, which gives me tan inverse, because I'm looking for that angle measure. Let me write this correctly, sorry. All right, so I'm looking for tan inverse of 1/3. Put your calculator in radian mode since all of our other values are in radian. And when you do that, you should get 0.32. So only when that value is not on your trig circle do you have to use your inverse function. All right, so that's it for 7.5 notes. Go ahead and get your worksheet completed and turn it in at the end of class. Have a good one. Bye.